So, Lauren, I think we are ready to start, and we'll continue to let people in, and thank you so much.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a nice week. And I want to say recently I had the pleasure of meeting an extraordinary example of not only a leader, but a true champion. Whatever she puts her mind to, under whatever circumstances or challenges come her way, she leads with true heart and compassion and passion. We are so fortunate to have that Ami Josh has found her way to Lake Oswego. Ami is a native of El Paso, Texas, and received her bachelor's and master's in biomedical engineering from Duke University. She spent the first part of her career as a design engineer in orthopedic reconstruction and engineering implants made of novel biomaterials. She then transitioned to manufacturing engineering and R&D engineering. She lived in Switzerland for a year, working on hand and wrist reconstruction applications, following which she spent a few years in the Northeast, Philadelphia, Boston, and upstate New York, working on sports medicine engineering applications as well. Through her engineering work, Ami holds 3 patents for novel designs of surgical implants and instrumentation. Ami has served in volunteer leadership consistently for the past 2 decades in various communities all over the country. In 2016, she started her own nonprofit organization, which focused on raising funds for charitable causes by providing handwritten gratitude notes for weddings and after funerals. After moving to Portland in 2019, she joined the ranks of Hunger Fighters Oregon Food Pantry, first as a pantry volunteer and then as the board president just before the pandemic. Through the first 18 months of the pandemic, she led the organization as the full-time volunteer executive director, growing services to include delivery to the homebound, extended pantry hours to serve the 6-fold increase in need, and created many processes within the organization that have set it up for long-term success. She served as a board member for 4 years, 3 of those as board president, stepping down at the end of 2023. Ami is also a local small business owner, founding her own sleep consultancy where she supports and empowers parents worldwide to form a lifetime of good sleep hygiene habits for their children. Lastly, Ami is a coach for Betterment, a coaching conglomerate which is reinventing the way leaders are supported in the workforce, life, and business through a wraparound care coaching model. Her passion for bringing out the best in others and building up people makes coaching with Betterment a perfect fit for the next phase of her career. Ami is a graduate of the Leadership Lake Oswego class of 2023 and a past recipient of Lake Oswego's Unsung Hero Award for her work with service for her work and service with hunger fighters. On a personal note, Ami and her husband have 2 young boys with whom she enjoys traveling and the outdoors. Ami is also an avid jigsaw puzzler and enjoys writing in her free time. And my question is, what free time? Ami?
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Lauren. I appreciate it. So nice to see everyone today and be here. Thank you to Christopher and Jen and Liz and Dr. Korach and Heather. I know he's not here yet, but for this opportunity and for all your coordination, and of course to this year's leadership team for all your hard work. And I know all the effort you put into doing this. It is such an honor to be here today, not only because I was where you are a year ago, but also just because I love meeting new people, learning from leaders, and I know some of you out there, and I look forward to getting to know the rest of you. So I do have slides to share. Liz, can I go ahead and do that? Is that fine? Able to, hopefully. Can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. Oops. Okay, well, with that, I will get started. So I thought a lot about what I would talk about today, and I met with Dr. Korach to see what his lesson would be, and kind of thinking, well, you're at the end of your year together, so there's a lot of concepts that are getting synthesized all at once. And as I reflect on my leadership journey and the things that Lauren outlined, one thing that really keeps coming up again and again is that I have never liked clarity and certainty in the roles that I choose. And so whether it was engineering and saying instead of a full-time role in one location, I'll take on the different role every 10 months, where I don't know who my next boss is going to be, and I don't know what my next project is going to be, and I don't know what my next team is going to be. But I really find that exciting. Choosing to work with new people, new teams, projects that were difficult, complex, or had many unknowns. In nonprofit work, there's always more to do and there's never enough time. But I always enjoyed being part of organizations that said, we know we want to do a lot of things. We don't have enough hands or hearts or minds to put behind it. What should we do? And so I think that Hunger Fighters was a really good fit for me because of the uncertainty. And the pandemic brought a lot of really difficult circumstances to a lot of people's lives, but I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to be in Hunger Fighters leadership when that happened, because it was my niche. It was very energizing for me to be around constant changes and constant uncertainty. And then, of course, as a small business owner, I didn't have any business background. Nobody in my family has run a business. I didn't have a network around it, but it was something I was passionate about. And I said, well, why not? Let's bring it on, bring on the unknowns. So when I think about my journey, that seems to be the unifying theme. And it made me kind of wonder, what can I share with you? And what benefit is there from this perspective to be able to share with you? But when I wrote these things out and I was starting to work on this, I realized we all face the same uncertainties, right? How do we handle them? In most, if not all jobs, and all of you out there, right? Whether you're a business owner, you're a teacher, you're in the city, you're in the police department, you work the front desk somewhere, you're anything that you do, you are facing uncertainty. So there's not always a clear path or a guaranteed result in your job. Even if we forget professions and we just put ourselves into our daily lives as a spouse, as a sibling, as a caregiver, there is work with new people, new teams, projects, whether they be formal or informal, are difficult, complex, or have many unknowns. And there are constant changes and uncertainty. So not unique to my journey. The unique part of my journey was I chose that, but we all face this every single day. So really, what I'd like to share with you is some of the tools and concepts that I've learned to rely on when I want to use that uncertainty and unpredictability of life to help me grow and strengthen me or my team's resilience, rather than letting that uncertainty feel like it's defeating me, disheartening me, or beating us down every day. Because it can often feel like that. Regardless of how passionate we are about what we do, it's hard to wake up every day and say, well, bring on the uncertainty again. So I'm going to be talking through 3 strategies that I use to navigate uncertainty, and also that I have observed many leaders use to navigate uncertainty. And keep in mind that all of these are positive moving strategies, meaning they keep us moving forward, they keep us accomplishing goals. But each one, of course, has its pros and cons and can be used in specific situations as desired. So there's no right or wrong, but we're going to talk through a little bit of the benefits of using some of them in certain situations, and perhaps why we would choose to not use others. And then I'd be curious for you guys to kind of do some thought exercises to say, which one do you use the most? Because there's probably one that's your wheelhouse, that is your go-to strategy. And it's harder for you to choose the others, even though you sometimes do. And then which one do you prefer now that you've sort of heard about all of them and had time to digest and understand them? So let's dive into uncertainty. So the first strategy is one in which we excel at identifying and avoiding uncertainties with the goal of continuing to move forward. Now, at first glance, this feels like avoidance, and I really want to emphasize that it's not. This is about core competency and about saying, I know what I'm really good at. I know the areas that I'm not so good at. And if I just stay to the things that I know that I'm really good at, I'm going to find my way through. I don't have to put myself in challenging situations. And keep in mind, there's no organization or no leader that chooses to do this all the time. This is one of the strategies that we use when we come across uncertainty. And uncertainty can be an obstacle, it can be a challenge, it can be just something surprising that's completely out of our control. But this is one tactic that keeps us moving forward. We just step to the side, we change the direction of our path, and we keep going. Now, leaders that follow this strategy are often very, very strong in their core competencies, have a strong sense of self in terms of what they can do, but they may not have spent a lot of time on self-reflection. And so they avoid the things they know they can't do, but there's not a lot of deep work going on as to why they can't do the things that they don't feel comfortable doing. But absolutely an effective strategy. And outside looking in, this person is successful. They're making it through. They're reaching their goal. So let's talk about the second strategy. This strategy excels at powering through any uncertainties that appear in the path, with again, the goal of getting to the other side quickly. Now notice this person isn't out looking for challenges. They're just drawing the straightest line from where they are to where they want to go. And if anything comes in the way, they navigate through it. But when they navigate through it, there is this time-bound aspect to it. There's this idea that they want to get to the other side. They want to do so quickly. They don't want to give it too much importance and staying within the challenge or the uncertainty. They just want to get to the other side. Again, a very effective strategy. Outside looking in, this person's going to be successful. This is the person that you might look at and say, nothing gets in their way. They just do it. They keep going. They do the next thing. They come across the next challenge. They do it. They seem to always figure it out. But a downside to this, similarly to the first one that had a downside, is that this can often promote burnout in an individual because the goal is move forward and move forward quickly. And so there's not a lot of thought being given to, is this the way that I should do it? I see it and I need to tackle it. Again, I cannot emphasize enough, no individual does this always at all times, nor does any organization or company always do this. But it can become the wheelhouse, the most preferred strategy, or the one that we default to. And then the third one. So this one is where we excel at situational decision-making, where we encounter uncertainties and we handle them as appropriate for the situation. And we give flexibility to the time spent and the direction taken. So this person is also getting from point A to point B. But every time they come across an uncertainty, they're using, in that moment, their situational decision-making muscle. Do they want to? Is it the right time? Should they go forward or backward? How long do they tackle that challenge? You can see in the large uncertainty pictured on here, go in and out several times, loop around, change directions, come out. And so the idea is that this person is actually thinking, but the downside of this is that time is required, right? There has to be that flexibility for getting to the goal that does not necessarily exist in all cases. So again, no organization, no leader can do this all the time because there can be external constraints. So then why these three methods, right? Why is it important to understand that there's different ways of tackling uncertainty that come our way? One example of where this can be really impactful to understand better is if we're trying to figure out, is there a best way? Now, oftentimes we look at those diagrams and say, well, the last one has to be the best way, right? Because it's flexible and it gives time for thought. But let's see. What happens when you hit a big uncertainty? And so in this case, the ocean. Let's say all those things were puddles and lakes. Here we have a big ocean that's being hit. So for strategy 1, which is avoid the uncertainty, get really good at recognizing and avoiding the uncertainty, what happens? When we get to the ocean, we try to go around it. Can we go around the ocean? We can run along the beach as long as we want. We're not going to get around the ocean. And so the next thought that pops into our head is, why can't I avoid it? What's wrong with me? Why am I stuck? Because we have always avoided every obstacle, every uncertainty that's come along our path. It's never stopped us before. And so now, why all of a sudden have I come across something that I cannot get past? And it becomes very inward facing, and it can feel like failure. Strategy 2. This is the power through method, right? These people know what they're doing. They figure it out. They're scrappy. Nothing's going to keep them down, hold them back, make them feel like they're not doing enough. What happens when they get to the ocean? They jump right in. Another uncertainty, bring it on. They start swimming, or they grab their rowboat and start paddling. What happens when they don't get to the other side? Why am I not reaching the other side? What's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Why can't I tackle this uncertainty the same way that I have tackled every uncertainty in my entire life? And this is what can often feel like defeat. So we have all in this room felt both of these things at some point, because we have used these strategies at some point. Strategy 3, remember, situational decision-making, deciding in the moment, what's the best path, not focused on the end goal. This person might say, I have never crossed an ocean. What do I need to do to understand this better? They're not focused on the fact that they didn't get to the other side or around it. They're simply saying, I haven't done this before. And this is where the growth happens. So oftentimes when I get to this point, there's a lot of people saying, that's just optimism. That's just the silver lining. That's just somebody saying it can be better than what you think it can be. You know, that's where I would push back a little bit and say optimism, right, is saying that it will be okay no matter what, versus this is a situation where we're admitting to ourselves that we don't know. It's the ability to say, I don't know. And in that is where the growth happens. And the way to distinguish these 3 strategies is when we think about where we start from. So I know in this class, and I know I'm sure Christopher started off the year the same way he did our year with you know, bringing awareness to awareness, and Dr. Korach built on that. Self-awareness is so important. The difference between these 3 strategies and why we end up with failure, defeat, or growth has to do with awareness and how we get from awareness to aspiration. So we're going to break that down a little bit more. So awareness, acceptance, and aspiration. So strategy 1 and strategy 2 jump directly from awareness to aspiration. What that means is that we're aware of something in our surroundings or within ourselves, and then immediately our aspiration comes from that awareness. From a simple sense, I see a sock on the floor, my aspiration is I must pick sock up off the floor. It doesn't belong there, right? In this case, awareness of the external uncertainty, which is the ocean, and the aspiration to overcome it. There is no awareness of an internal uncertainty, right? This person is extremely certain that, like they have avoided or like they have powered through, they can do this again. So the dialogue going on is, not showing up, sorry. There it is. I aspire to avoid the ocean because I always succeed by seeing and avoiding the uncertainty. Or I aspire to cross the ocean because I always succeed by overcoming uncertainty in my path. So does everyone see how we jump directly from awareness to aspiration, right? Now, where strategy 3 is different is that it actually goes through an intermediate step, which is acceptance. So they are aware of the same external uncertainty, the ocean. When we use strategy 3, we are, however, also aware of our internal uncertainty. So that all is then being accepted. I never crossed an ocean, can't cross an ocean today, don't know if a crossing is the important thing, and I accept that both of these things are true. I accept that this is a new external uncertainty, and as a result, I accept that I am feeling internal uncertainty. Notice how in the first two, there's no room for acceptance and reflection. So acceptance is a really important intermediate process to then having larger, broader, and more comprehensive aspirations. Acceptance means, in a form, moving on, letting go, being okay with. And when we make our aspirations without acceptance, there's a part of us that we have not reflected on, that we are not aware of, and that we are not okay with. And we carry that part with us all day and all week and all year. So an aspiration that comes from acceptance might be, I aspire to be able to understand more about the external uncertainty. Notice that the aspiration is not based on, I have to tackle what's out there. So one way that this could look, if we actually stick to the ocean analogy, and then we'll move away from the ocean analogy, is if, for example, the person using strategy 3 might say, well, let me see how far I can swim. And they swim 50 yards and they're exhausted and they come back. And they say, okay, let me see how far I can swim tomorrow. And they swim 60 yards and they come back. And then they keep working on it and they get to 100 yards out and they realize, well, I'm really thirsty. So the next day, they swim 100 yards with a water bottle tied to their back. And then they rehydrate and then they keep swimming, and so on and so forth. So it helps us build this scaffolding to growth because we have moved through acceptance, because we are not still focused on the fact that we can't do it or didn't know how to do it. We're just trying to build past that. So it all sounds well and good. It would be wonderful if we could accept everything, right, that's happening to us. So now let's talk about it in a little bit real sense, practicing together. So I'd like you all to sort of jot down and do this exercise with me. An example is that you've been preparing all week for an important presentation to your manager. Late nights, all that hard work. 15 minutes before the presentation, you get a text from your manager that she can't make it due to a flat tire. So I'd like you to do both of these paths. Use awareness and go straight to aspiration. And what does your aspiration look like? Versus using awareness, acceptance, and then what does your aspiration look like? So I'm going to give you a second to think it through, but then we'll do it together so that we've done an illustrative example of how this works for us. And the questions below will help you kind of identify the pieces. Okay. So if we label the things, right, the external uncertainty we encounter is the flat tire, right? It's the circumstance over which we have no control. It happened externally. The internal uncertainty that we encounter is the disappointment or frustration or anger that we may feel because we prepared so hard and that opportunity to execute was taken away from us, right? So that's the awareness piece. Now, if we jump straight to aspiration, we don't accept that it's okay to be frustrated. We just say, I'm frustrated. I'm disappointed. This was supposed to happen. The flat tire got in my way. Then our aspiration can't get much further past, I really just want to do this presentation, and I really wanted to do this presentation, and I just need to figure out when it's rescheduled because it needs to happen because I work so hard on it. So the aspiration comes directly from the awareness. Now, if we accept, okay, I accept that it's disappointing that I couldn't do it. I accept that I'm frustrated, but I also accept that flat tires happen and there's nothing anybody can do about that. Then once we accept that, and it's not just words, we have to reflect and internally accept that, then our aspiration becomes, well, now I'm done with the presentation. There were a couple places where I was kind of hoping to tweak it and I ran out of time. So maybe before we reschedule the meeting, I'll go do that. But we have let go, by accepting, we have let go of the awareness piece that drives us to a limited aspiration. We can move past that. It doesn't travel with us all day. So I'm just going to read this example for you, and then you guys can do it on your own time and kind of think about it as I wrap up. But this is another one. You moved your entire schedule around to be able to coach your child's soccer team. And the day before the season starts, he breaks his leg. So now go through that same exercise of how do you move through acceptance to be able to open yourself to lots of aspirations. The aspiration that comes without acceptance is, I'm not coaching his soccer team. He broke his leg. Very easy. There's a lot more aspirations that come if you move through acceptance. So what does this all mean for us? This is all very nice academic lesson in uncertainties and the strategies behind it. But what does this mean? What can you take and what can you implement? So the first thing is practice identifying external uncertainties. We face them every day. And somebody said when we first got on the call and everybody was trickling in, notice the little things and the big things. Well, noticing the little things is noticing the little external uncertainties that come our way that we let cause fluctuations in us, and even just labeling them and as things we cannot control. But what we can control is how we reflect and how we develop self-awareness around that. So do that. Reflect and say, I was surprised that that person didn't come to the appointment when they said they were going to. But then what do I do with that? What do I do with that feeling instead of being angry and carrying it around with me all day? That self-awareness and acceptance can say, anybody would be upset, but I can move on. I accept that anger is a rational response to that. And now let me aspire to get something done in that time that's just been freed up. Or let me aspire to read this book that I've been waiting to read. Or let me aspire to sit and have a coffee by myself in peace. So I would encourage you as leaders in your family, leaders in your homes, your businesses, your communities, to practice moving through acceptance. And then as leaders who influence teams and organizations, create cultures of moving through acceptance and start this dialogue of uncertainty and understanding that uncertainty is inevitable and not everyone should be like me and be so excited and energized by uncertainty. But hopefully we can all build some muscles around not being afraid of it and not being worried that it's something that we're going to have trouble tackling. We all do it every day in our jobs. Now we just have some structure to put into practice when we feel like we've come against an ocean. So thank you so much for listening. It was fun to share with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, Ami. I know we all encounter oceans here and there. Anybody have any questions for Ami? If you do, please use that hand raise function so your thing will pop to the top. I got clapping. Thank you, Judy. We got some clapping going on. Is that meant to be a hand raise,
It's
Judy?
supposed to be a hand. I don't know how to do it.
Well, congratulations. You've got our attention. Go ahead and ask Ami a question.
Oh, I want to see the last slide. I'm sorry, I didn't get it all down. I wanted to write all that down.
Sure, I can do that. Let me share my screen again.
Nice.
Let's see if it'll let me go backwards, though. There it is. This one?
Judy, you're speaking, but no one can hear you. All right. Well, Ami, I thought that was pretty fantastic. What is it? What stood out to me from the very beginning is you're seeking out these uncertainties that so many other people, like I think most people, devise life strategies to reduce uncertainty in their life. And here you are seeking out uncertainty and change. How does that come about? I mean, briefly, that's pretty exceptional. I don't know if there's anything you can say about it. I just want to say it's pretty exceptional, and we're glad that you do.
I appreciate that. I think what I would want everybody to sort of think about is that I seek it out and that it exists. And then I say, I'll take this space, right? So I'm not a risky person. I'm not out there bungee jumping without safety lines and, all that kind of stuff. It really is about saying in every organization, in every team, there's that thing that kind of nobody knows how to start or nobody knows how to tackle, or that project that everybody's like, oh, just please don't give it to me. And I've found that over time, those are the spaces that I find really energizing. And maybe it's that I like working, with little guidance. And so that gives me that space to just kind of take it over and say, okay, what do we need? How do we do it? And then bring it back to the team. So probably personality as much as it is that, but these places exist, right? In anything that you think of for work, there's that project or that thing that nobody wants to tackle, but that needs to get done.
Absolutely. And that's a super positive approach. Cece has her hand up for a question.
Yes, hi. Thank you. First of all, I enjoy and grateful that you have this slide for us to learn. I've learned a lot. It just make me feel more secure that every one of us really encounter uncertainty. So make you feel like you're not the only one. Actually, uncertainty happened to everyone. The two scenario that you provided, there sound as if we have a room to wiggle of our adjustment. I am curious for those who are in the financial institution and policy making institution. Those are not much room to wiggle through the uncertainty, where time constraint, when you're talking about across the ocean, or those in the athletic competition, say marathon runner, they go by time. There's no luxury to go through uncertainty. You gotta go across. I would like to hear how you put in the acceptance in those situations. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question. And there are so many heavily regulated industries where we don't feel like the structures and systems allow us to do that. Here, I would say that it's even more important to not worry about the time dependency, but think about the internal work that you can do. So how we react to the fact that the external uncertainty exists actually gives us the wiggle room. The wiggle room is not in our timeline, it's in our emotional bandwidth. So if you can create space in both ways, right? You can create space externally and you can create space internally. But in those heavily regulated institutions, you're creating space internally by saying, because I didn't get to the end, I'm not a failure. I'm not defeated. How will I handle this challenge differently internally than I handled it the last time? So if you have a specific example, I'd love to grab a coffee and chat more about it. But that's really what we're looking at, is that the time dependency, the time to do work is not always external. It can also be internal. And as leaders in such heavily regulated institutions, you can have an impact to change and those structures, those external uncertainties that are so rigid and don't allow for time. You can have that influence and impact.
Nice. Thank you, Ami. Any other questions for Ami? We have time
Christopher,
for
can I throw
Please.
one in?
Absolutely, Mark.
So just a couple of reflections around the edges here. One of the things that military leaders are sort of indoctrinated with is every battle plan lasts until the first shot is fired. And so it is really interesting to do this kind of planning, but the problem is that when you get involved in the financial world or on the martial arts mat or whatever it is, you know, Christopher can teach a few moves 1,000 times, and then he's got somebody on the mat and he doesn't know exactly what they're going to do. He has to be spontaneous. So, I mean, it's an interesting dance in all of these things, how to deal with constant uncertainty and bring planning along and interweave with that uncertainty that is just a fundamental part of life. And human beings have spent thousands of years trying to produce certainty. You know, they build pyramids and are buried with all their family members and their kitty cats and dogs and treasure, hoping that they can come back, you know, with some predictability and certainty. I mean, this is just innate to our nature. But the presence of and reality of uncertainty is fundamentally how it is, right? So you approach and work around and navigate through that, Ami, with great skill.
Thanks, Mark.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark, and spot on observations as always. Any last question for Ami? All right. Well, I just want to say, Ami, it was a real treat to go through Leadership Lake Oswego with you last year, and it's an even bigger treat to have you come back and share your thoughts on leadership and acceptance with us today. So thank you so very much. Thank you for being here, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you all so much. And please reach out. You have my email address. I'd love to grab a coffee, chat more if anybody wants to.
Can that material be shared, Emmy?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
I can do that.
It was recorded.
Okay.
And
Thank
I
you.
can vouch that she is an amazing conversationalist to have coffee with.
Nice. Awesome. Judy, you have your hand up. Are you clapping this time, or is your hand up? You're on mute though, so I can't hear you.
So I think that the idea about the planning is always good because it puts tools in your toolbox, and you might not use them right then. If there's some uncertainty that comes up, you might not be able to use that plan, but you have that tool in your toolbox. And maybe next time, if you come up with some kind of a situation, you could use those tools the next time, you know. So it's not bad to plan. It's adding tools to your toolbox. Is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And for those of you who did not read Liz's comment, remember that this whole program is being recorded, and you'll be sent the link to this program, so you can always go back and pull up Ami's material that way as well. Although I would definitely encourage you to reach out to her directly and have that aforementioned coffee. I too have had coffee with Ami, and she's an amazing conversationalist. So again, thank you so much, Ami. Round of applause for Ami. Thank you. And Bill, what's our schedule? Are we giving them 5 minutes for a bio break here?
I think that's a very good idea, Christopher. And Ami, thank you very much. Very, very good.
Thanks so much.
Let's take a break and come back and go after it.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll see you in 5.
Okay, 9:46. Invite folks back and we'll get started.
Okay, as soon as we pick up a few more people, we're going to begin. And if you have your materials in front of you, hopefully you do. We're going to start on the back page.
So are you ready to turn that on? Wait, pull up.
Yeah, I got about, yeah, let's start. Okay, we are going to start at the bottom of the back page. And so what I want you to do is to go down to a framework, a mental model that I use a lot, because first of all, knowing what you're trying to talk about is critical to making any kind of a decision. If you don't land on what's essential to know about what you're trying to talk about, you're probably going to miss the mark. The why question, why does it matter question, is also important. And how you're going to make something that matters work is really what you have to end with, because you're trying to make your leadership role successful. So as we talk about leadership, it's the know-how that we have to get to, or you're going to be unsuccessful as a leader. But I want you to read below what I've written, because I'm going to ask you why this is important when we think about leadership. Novices, meaning people that have not had a significant amount of experience as a leader, novices are different than experts the way they problem solve. Experts tend to work forward through a problem, like Iamie's talking about uncertainty, and novices tend to work backward. Now, that's pretty well researched. And the one reason, can you lift it up a little bit, Liz? Can you pull it up slightly? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so when we look at novices, they have to start from what they want to accomplish, because they know less know how. When you read that, hopefully you read it and thought about it. Why does that matter? Why does it matter to leadership? Why does the fact that novices have to work backward from what they know they want to accomplish, instead of working forward as more experienced leaders master the art of leadership by working forward through a problem? Why does that matter? And so I can go back to the visual of people. Liz, that'd be good. I want the people back. Okay, so let's start out here. Why would that matter? If you know that, why would it matter to how you lead? Anybody want to give that a try? All right, let me give you an example. When I'm working with a group of school board members about instructional techniques and predictability, what can I pretty much expect? That they're novices about instructional theory and practice, or that they are well-versed in instructional theory and practice?
Novices.
What
More than
did you say,
likely,
Mark?
they're experts. Novices.
Okay, and in general, they won't be able to tell you some of the finer points of what we're looking for from our instructional methodology. So if you're presenting something to somebody that's a novice, they might be an expert in lots of domains, but if they're not an expert in the domain that you're going to talk to them about, what do you need to do? What do you need to do? We're talking about what action you need to take. Where do you, so this is, our whole lesson today is going to be about process thinking and processes. We're going to be working with interviewing a prospective leader that you might want to be part of your team. You're going to develop questions. We're going to go there, but right now, what I want to make sure that we start with thinking about, it's your know-how that's going to matter as a leader. Not what you know, it's what you know how to do and have the capability of doing that's going to matter as a leader. So what would you want to start them at? Am I completely in la la land?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out how to find my hands, but I couldn't.
Okay.
Work on that. I think maybe what you're saying is you have to go to where they're coming from. So you have to put yourself in their way of thinking and in their thought processes to know how to present it, so they'll understand it better.
Bingo. Now, what do I mean by bingo? Some of my administrators in the past who present with the board don't start with where they are, to ground them in the reality of what you're trying to accomplish. So if you don't start by anchoring them with what they know and can relate to and then build from there, you're going to have difficulty with them understanding where you're going with your presentation. So it's framing and essentially locating them in a way that you can work from, that they understand from the beginning. So one point that I want to keep circling back to in our last two sessions together. We have today, we have next month, that's it. But think about know-how and think about situating people from what you believe they can relate to continue to work with them with wherever you're going. So 1 point. The next point is on the back page also. So Liz, would you pull that one up? Now, you know I like to play around with visuals. If you go to the top of the page, as we look at leadership, we've talked a lot about centering. And so I want you to think about centering again, because this is a very important leadership concept. For you to center yourself or for you to center other people, because as a leader, you're working with other people, and what you do to influence them to head in the right direction or come up with ideas that are going to help you, whatever it is that you want from them, you need to connect with them. So when you talk about centering, it isn't just centering yourself, you have to center a group. In my case, I had to center a whole school district. I had to center a teaching staff. I had to work from where they were and what they understood, and they understood a lot, but we were working with ideas that they had not thought of, like any leader works with. So when I talk with you about that idea of centering, it isn't just you that have to be centered, but it's the people that you work with. If they're not centered and they have some similar motivation for what they care about, you're going to have difficulty getting them all on the same page to work forward in some ways. So I want you to look at the visual, and I want you to read the statement that's there. Leadership calls for a mindset that values the benefits of both agreement and disagreement. Why is that important to center it? Why is that an important idea to center? Because in any group, is everybody going to agree with you?
No.
I mean, it basically means that you have to get, to lower it down to a base level. You have to play to your audience and get buy-in.
Exactly. And your ability to do that, to work from what you have that you can agree on, at the same time, to be centered, what you can agree on and what you don't agree on. You need to center and know that you're playing between those variables of what we can get agreement about and what we can't get agreement about. Does that make sense to you? Because you're going to have to play out that balance. And what I'm wanting to stress as we go into what we're going to do today is we're often working between a balance of what we can agree with or agree about and what we can't agree with or agree about. And we're looking for the merits of both. So when we look at yin and yang as a visual and think about the competing and complementary opposites that are the major forces of the universe, we need to be able to know what's on both sides of the equation to be centered. Does that make sense? Because that's what you're working with. Yeah. So you need to know what we can agree with and what we can't agree with, and you need to find your way with that. Yeah. And so I want you to just keep both of those things in mind as we go through what we're going to work on today. And we will maybe get back to this page as we work with the time we have today. So let's go to the first page. Let's go to the first page. Okay. Now, I've tried to work with timing and time and process thinking. Process thinking, when I built this particular page, I wanted us to get the value of thinking about process that we would go through to develop a committee who was interviewing for a specific position to hire a leader that you think is the best fit possible for a role that you're trying to hire for. I've done a lot of interviewing, not just for the school district, of course, but the last interview process I did for the city was for the chief of police. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is to pick a position that you're going to try to hire for. And then I'm going to flip that after we do that and talk about strategies, process strategies for you to prepare for being interviewed and hopefully selected for a position you really want. So that's where we're headed. That's where we're headed. And I like the visual up above. What matters most to you must always compete with the restrictions of time. Your time is always limited as a leader. It's 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. With leadership, there are so many things that you can do with your time that's valuable. So how do you make choices about what you do with your time? And so up above, I have, as a leader, it's no secret that what you choose to do with your time is one of the most important decisions that you're going to make as a leader. And then I've got some questions there, because I want you to start thinking about questions. Questions are very, very important as you connect with other people. The ability to ask the right question at the right time in the right way is a leadership ability that is really, really helpful for you as you're working with connection with people. I remember one of the first things I heard Christopher say that really struck a chord with me is, and I think I can say it almost exactly, a conversation without a question is not much of a conversation. And so I've got 6 questions for you. And so what I'd like you to do is we have facilitators and we have groups. And I would like our first attempt to go into a group setting where you work with these questions. My ask of you in this situation is to go into your group and go through and see how individuals in the group would answer that question if they were asked of you, if you were interviewing for a position. How would you answer those questions based on all the months we've been working together about leadership? What could you bring to bear to answer those questions? And when we come back, I'll ask each group to pick one question that you thought was very insightful to share with the group how you answered it. Is that good? You fair? Fair ask?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna want you to head into your groups.
Okay, how many minutes are we?
And we're looking at 12 minutes.
All right, here we go. Everybody have a group?
I don't know, we're still
Well,
looking.
there's still- Okay, Jason is in a meeting. Parker. Okay. In 2 seconds, it'll all be on the screen.
Okay.
There you go. Everybody's here.
Thank you very much. And what would help us now, I think, is that if everyone who has been lucky enough to be the designated speaker selected by the group.
Where is my?
Are we okay with that? Would you raise your hand so you up here in the upper left of the screen?
It looks like you.
So there you go, Trevor. Way to take it over.
Okay, good job, Trevor.
Okay, we got everybody. So start with Judy and then go to Laura.
Okay, I'm asking you now to share any one of the insights that you feel was a good answer to the question if you were asked that in an interview. And so, Judy, you're up. Can't hear you.
I'm going to talk about what we talked about in our session. And even though the time is limited, it helps us from this class. We've learned that pausing is really critical, and that and then we can respond better if we can pause. And it takes time to pause and to think through something, but it's better to put that time up front before we make a decision, because it can be more informed and more reasonable and more thought through, and your emotions can be under control. And you won't hurt people's feelings if you pause a moment to think about it first. And you can also make the right decision the right time better if you make that time to pause, because it's more important to do the right thing first, make the right decision, because if you do it right the first time, if it's worth doing right the first time. Because if you don't, you're going to be backpedaling on the end of it. You might have to, oh, I'm sorry I said that, or oh, that was the wrong decision, or I spoke out of turn or something, that you have to, if you do it right the first time, you save yourself time, actually, even though you pause. And is also the limitation of being good enough, because you don't want to be so perfect that you can't move on. And you have to find what matters most as well. You don't want to lose momentum. And there's Joyce was talking about law of diminishing returns, that you can't be perfect. So, you have to limit the perfection of it. But at least if you try to do it right the first time, you won't have to make up for lost time later, and you won't have to apologize or do something that, anyway, that basically
I think that's good advice. I appreciate the advice. Did you have an example of a person who was going to say how they would respond to a question?
I'm sorry, we didn't talk about that. We only talked about the questions.
Okay, that's good. What you shared was good. What you shared was good. So, Lark, I think you're up.
Who is?
Oh, sorry. We talked about we were talking about number 3 in particular, and what I talked about a little bit was that as a relatively new leader, I've made a lot of mistakes, and even when I'm an experienced leader, I probably will continue to make mistakes. And that in particular, I talked about a situation where I had a conversation with someone on my staff that didn't go as I had hoped it would. And I think a big part of that was because I didn't take the time to reflect and really think about how I was going to respond to a situation. I was responding, they had a high level of anxiety, so I just wanted to get in there and talk to them to help ease the anxiety, but ended up damaging the relationship a little bit and causing some harm because I didn't take the time to really think through the whole conversation before I went in. So I was able to make up some of that ground and go back and talk to the person again and repair things with them. But that conversation and that harm that I caused will always be with that person and in that relationship. So I did lose an opportunity. I lost that moment to build a relationship rather than harm a relationship, because I was just trying to react rather than respond and really take the time to think through how that conversation would go to make sure that I was taking care of that person and communicating what I really was trying to say clearly. So that was kind of what we talked about for number 3.
Great, super job. Thank you. Okay, Trevor, you're up.
All right. So Chris group, we also chose number 3, just to piggyback off of all the great comments that were just made. Thank you, Laura. We found that a lot of the statements, almost all of them actually circled back to number 3, maybe because we found it the most insightful, or in particular, when being good enough is good enough rather than taking extra time to be somewhat better, because you don't want to be mistaken or make up for lost ground. Also taking time to pause and reflect and moving forward. There's also a comment about there's a right time, a right comment, and in the right way to go about something. I also found immediately when we were talking about it that first impressions are key, and it's important to be prepared to present a competent and capable front, and just circling it back to your example of the teaching moment with the school board about how you don't want to go through remedial steps and taking that extra time and losing that ground, but you want to meet them where they're at and move forward together. So I guess kind of 2 and 3, but we liked 3 the most.
Super. Good job.
You have Caitlin.
Caitlin. Thank you.
Okay,
Liz.
so my group talked mostly about 2 and 3. 2, we were saying when you're having a conversation with somebody, some people just trying to get through the conversation. When you, especially with work, if you're on the phone trying to gather information, they're trying to get through. When you take that pause, you can really gather the core of what they want or what they're trying to get. Like for travel example, like we talk to people on the phone for travel, we are saying, okay, so you want to go to the beach in Mexico, why do you want to do that? And then finding out what they want is really what's key to making their trip better. And in that pause, you're making them also reflect and communicate better, trying to figure out the core of everything. And then with 3, we were saying that when you're mistaken, it doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. Everyone's been mistaken. And you can use that to learn from. And okay, how can I better communicate this for the future? And taking that pause, again, you could have done that the first time, but you could do that after they're like, I don't understand. And then you're learning from that. Yes, you're wasting time and you could cause some more confusion because now they're taking 2 different things, but you can learn from that in the future. And that's kind of what we gathered from it.
Thank you. You're doing great. Andrea.
Hi there, good morning. So our group chose to discuss question number 5. When is good enough good enough? When should you be striving to be somewhat better? And the majority of our conversation reflected around situations and ways to apply that. And we talked about the 80-20 rule. We talked about good enough for government work. We talked about when the stakes are low. And that in certain situations, you might apply what Amy talked about in terms of accepting a situation where where good enough is okay because your aspiration is developing a habit, but maybe not. So an example would be children doing homework. You want them to develop the habit of doing the homework. So maybe the homework doesn't have to be done to perfection as long as they develop the habit. Then we got into, we transitioned into a discussion of athletics and what level of practice should a child be applying to be on a team, and transition to a discussion of Olympians and Paralympians. And I think I got chosen to be the speaker because I just threw this concept in right at the end. But I think it's important to take a look at what our standards of perfection are and acknowledge that they have essentially been defined by centuries of traditional practices, systemic practices that say this is perfection and everybody must meet that. And I think in the last, 5 years, maybe 10 years, we are learning as a society that those standards of perfection maybe aren't appropriate for everybody that we want participating. And so good enough, there was a time when good enough might be a derogatory statement, like, oh, they're good enough, but not perfect. Now we say good enough might equal diverse or different or coming at it from another angle, and therefore, bringing more success to the table. So I think it's an interesting question, and one that we have to ask ourselves, solidly.
I think all of you have done very well. I think we're done right now, and I want to make a point on Andrea, what you just said, that not everything you do deserves the kind of time that the most important things you have to do really, really well need. So I was once speaking to a group in the prospective wannabe leaders in the Seattle area, and I used this statement. It was a little overstated, but to be successful as a leader, you have to master the art of being mediocre, which causes them to gasp. But what I mean by that is there are some things that don't matter as much as other things, and your time management needs to focus on what really matters so you can do as good a job as possible. And it takes time to do a really good job. As you were just saying, if you don't take the time to really reflect and recenter yourself and think about why you have to make this a superlative example of your leadership, it takes time to do that. And so other things can be just good enough. And the ability to make those choices are really important. What are the most important things, most valued things, and how are you going to get the most out of the opportunity with those, where you can just get by with some other things that you don't have to spend as much time on. Okay, good job. Now I want you to develop some questions to interview someone who's in a public service role, like a chief of police, a superintendent, a high school principal, an elementary principal, a city manager. Let's assume that you were on a committee that was interviewing for one of those kind of roles, and your group will have to select the role that you're trying to hire for. And then, if you can give me that foremost, you want the yeah. Can you put it up? Yeah. I want to make sure that the facilitators know what my request is. And I just threw this at Liz this morning. Okay. You got it? Is that what you want? I want the 4 questions. Oh, I'm putting that in the chat. Oh, okay. Okay. Can you put it up? Well, it's in the chat. I'll see it in the chat. Okay. Okay. What we're looking for now is, I want you, so looking at that front page, I want you to center the group by talking about what kind of person you want to seek when you're trying to hire. So I want 4 characteristics that you think this person needs to have to be a good chief of police, or to be a good city manager, or to be a good police officer, or a good elementary principal. Pick 4 qualities that you want to look for with your questions. And then I want you to come up with 3 questions, one of which needs to be a question so that you can determine some kind of sense of how the person thinks. And 2 other questions that you think would be valuable, that can get group agreement on, that you would ask during the interview, and tell me what you would be looking for. Now let's just see if that just made sense to you. Okay, does it make sense to you what you're being asked to do? Christopher's got his thumb up. He's set. Good, good, good. Anybody that would like anything else other than encouragement? There's value in doing this, because if you don't ask the right questions, that help you make a good decision. I've made good decisions, I've made bad decisions. And the bad decisions are going to cost you a ton of what? Time. Because you're going to have to clean up after yourself.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to have as much certainty as you can about who you want to select. In Lake Oswego, as you would expect, we are very, very fortunate because we are a destination community and a destination school district. So we get top candidates all the time. And so I want to give you 15 minutes on this. And so when you come back, I want someone to speak for you, and I want you to just list the 4 things you were looking for. And then I want the one question you zeroed in on to see how well the person thinks. And an example of that would be, look at the Einstein quote at the top of the page. If I asked you to answer this question, the top of your page of your curriculum, the very top, as the circle of knowledge expands, so does the circumference of the darkness surrounding it. If you ask them what that has to do with leadership, that would be the kind of question that wouldn't be a gotcha question, but would be a question that you would have some idea of how the person tried to come up with an answer to that, to assess somewhat how they think. Okay? Bless you and good luck.
Okay, off you go, 15 minutes. There we go. Okay, here comes everybody. There you go.
Okay, if we could do the same thing we did last time, if the person who is speaking will raise their hand, we'll sort them into the upper left on my screen. Hopefully you picked a different person to speak this time. I didn't specify that, so you don't have to change anything if you like the person so much last time that you didn't do that. And
You start with Larry.
Oh, great. So again, now what I'm looking for is for you to tell us first what role you're hiring for, and then what questions are that you had. And I want to have you explain the one that you think will help you most see how the person thinks as you look at these candidates. So, Larry, you're up.
Okay, well, so the position that we hired for was the head of the city water utility. And first, we actually identified sort of 4 values we were looking for in that candidate. And the first was experience / the responsibility in taking on the position. The second value was the ability to take on feedback from others. The third value we were looking for was resiliency. And fourth was the ability to be respectful of others. So those are kind of the 4 values we were going to look for in the interview. The first question, and probably the broader question, was asking the person how they would balance and prioritize the needs of the community with the resources at their disposal for the job, and giving them a nice open-ended question on how they balance that. The second question we came up is asking them to describe a challenge that they had addressed in a previous role and how they approached it. And the final question was asking them to describe their concept of teamwork.
And why did you feel that question relative to teamwork was going to help you with how they think?
Well, it was really addressing how it gets back sort of the question of the resources at your disposal. I mean, the idea behind teamwork is making sure that everybody's engaged and everybody's important in meeting the needs of your organization. I mean, in my role as a manager, the best answer I ever got to that question was somebody from the U.S. Army who served in Iraq, and his definition of teamwork was leave no one behind.
Cool. Very good. Let's move on. Good job. Parker.
Yeah, I kind of came in late and we somewhat ran out of time, but we'll give you our best here. We were looking for the role of the director of the Parks and Rec Department. And the 4 traits that we thought were important for this role that we would be looking for would be someone that is a forward thinker or visionary, that has good, clear communication and leadership skills, that has a competency and skill for the field that they're operating in, and someone that is community focused and centered. And then the questions that we came up with, first one being to just kind of have very open-ended and try and learn about the person, but the question being, tell me about you and your story and kind of how you've gotten to where you are. Then the next question flowing into, what is your why? What is your passion, and why do you think that you're right for this role and this role is right for you? And then kind of more of a work-centric for the role being, what is your short term? What would you like to try and accomplish in the short term of 6 months, maybe in the midterm of 1 year, and in the long term of 3 years in this role? And then trying to get deeper into that, kind of discovering their leadership skills question. Kind of ran out of time on that one, but had the idea of kind of having a scenario-based question to see how they would respond, where there's not really a right or wrong answer, but seeing, here's the fact set, this situation arises, how do you react, and what do you do to take your team forward?
Yeah, that definitely works for seeing how they process through something, how they think about it. Good job. Very good. Who's up? George.
Okay, so I'll say we're looking at hiring mid-manager, frontline supervisor in law enforcement. Seemed to be the natural one to go to. So what we focused on, some of the characteristics that we were looking for is actually flexibility, compassion, trust, integrity, the things that you would expect that we would be looking for. But we also threw in the concept of excellence, and always learning. I mean, those are the kind of the things that we wanted to focus on for the characteristics area. We probably stayed with some pretty traditional questions along the lines of what I usually like to ask folks to kind of get to how they think is more focused on, tell me about what you've done to prepare for the position, and what is it about this particular job that drives you in this direction. I want to know what it is that's motivating them to do the work that we're asking them to do for us. The other question we typically ask is, I want to know a leadership style, because what I want to know is how are they going to relate to the people within the organization, and how are they going to relate to the community? So the question is more geared to, I don't need to promote and hire people that are going to be focused on just a dictatorial process. I want to know people who actually think and have compassion and understanding, and understand that there are 100 ways to get to the right place. So those are some of the questions that we ask. And then finally get to the question of, tell me a time that you have tried to implement or have implemented a program or a process where you have failed, and what did you learn from that? And I'll tell you, I hate the question because I hate answering it. but it's one that it really causes a person to dig a little deeper into themselves. And I'm not even really looking at what was the failure. What I want to know is how they react to it. What did they learn from it? How would they avoid ending up in the same place at another time? Or do they use it and look at it as it's actually not a failure? It's only a failure if you take nothing away from it. So those were the kind of the highlights of our conversation. We were going to do a team approach. So if I missed anything, any of my team members can jump in and fill in the gap.
You did great.
Any
Yeah.
team member? Okay. Abby.
Okay, we are hiring for a city manager. We're looking for excellent communication skills, problem-solving skills, leadership style, or, how they might empower others. And then past experience, relevant experience to this job. So the 3 questions we thought to ask, couple were, how would you approach conflict between a couple of subordinates or different stakeholders? Another question would be kind of on the other flip side of that failure, but tell me about a time that you went above and beyond what was asked from you. And the last question that was going to tell us more about how they really think would be a situational approach. So what would you do in the case of a certain emergency, but in this instance, there is an active shooter at one of the schools? And so what we'd be looking for there is, how they fill their role, what they do, and how to comfort the community while supporting their staff that is, responding to it as, well as, the other things they might be doing in that position.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Any other comment about that process anybody has?
Bill, I apologize. I got cut off before I was able to throw CC under the bus and say she had to present for us. So I will jump in here and basically use all of CC's material because I thought it was fantastic. The 4 characteristics our group kind of came up with was cultural competency. Where's the area you'll be working and what do you know about, not just the area, but the people that make up that area, and how did you build your cultural competency? Big picture thinker, how you look at big picture and focus down into a small, into the actual problem. Confidence and empathy. And then what's really important there is how did you develop again your empathy? And I think we had a lot of conversation about that. One of the things that came up was in my past or my experience, I've had friends that have risen up to police chiefs and fire chiefs, and one of my friends went way high in the DEA. And the funny thing about the characteristic about him is you would think DEA, boy, those guys, but he wasn't the cleanest of folks in high school. And to, take a straight and narrow path and work his way up was an interesting dynamic. And when you ran into him at the 10-year reunion or 20-year reunion or 30 or, my God, 40-year high school reunion, it was interesting how he just kept rising up the path. And you would just think, I can't believe this is the same person. So who I used to stand next to and pray all the time. Yeah. And then the final thing there was one of the things that came out about the questions was one of the things you want to do with the question is make sure the questions are going to be a way to be reflective of the characteristics you're looking for. So try to bring the questions to that. But then CC threw in a great one at the end and said that she ends all of her interviews with tell me the funniest story you've ever been involved in. But then of course we all kind of cringe, like maybe our funny stories aren't really shareable. So maybe we don't want to do that one. So then we opted for, what's the most impactful story you can share with me? When's there been a period in your life or an event in your life that you felt you were most impactful? So I thought that was a great question to kind of make them think, hopefully make them leave the interview with a sense of confidence that it went well because they were able to convey to you. And then also, it's telling if someone says, you know, I can't think of one off the top of my head. That's a telling answer. So thank you, Cece, for all your answers.
Thank you, Dan. Good job.
Thank you, Dan. I'm not that good at public speaking. I only share story.
We have just about 6 or 7 minutes, and then Christopher's going to take over and ask you the question about what you're paying attention to and what you've gained as you have experienced in the past. So I have to micro down, and so I'm going to spend all my time on the bottom of the page, and I'm going to talk at you because I want to give you some ideas that might fit into your plans when you interview for something. If you do. On the back page, I think everything on this page is pretty readable. What I want to emphasize on that page is when you meet with your teams, there are different ways to structure what you're looking for. And if you read that again, and I would ask you, how many of these different ways of posing the question to your team do you practice? Okay, I'm going to leave that. Now, when you interview, so I'm going to put it there. One of the most important things to realize to start with is that your interview, if it is a team interview, and I'm going to concentrate on a team interview, there are all kinds of interviews, structures. If it's the way we did it with the Lake Oswego School District, the final person that a person gets to meet with is me. I'm responsible for everything that happens in the district. So I want the last shot at whether that's the right person or not. But we go through teams where we have a group. One of the things that's really important is for you to do your best as someone who's being interviewed to be yourself, the best version of yourself, and still answer the questions well that the committee is working or that the person is asking you. So one of the things that I built down at the bottom of the page is what I do when I coach people on the being interviewed side of the game. And so one of the things that is so important is to understand what the question really is and what motivates the question. So if you, when you're listening to the question, if you don't think about it for a moment and take the time, even as you can give it a mini pause to think, ask yourself, what are they asking and what's the reason they're asking this? The second thing is that 50% of the interview process is going to be dependent on whether they like you or not, which has nothing to do directly with the expertise you demonstrate in terms of the role. Do they like you or not? So being able to present your best self in the situation becomes a challenge for some people because they are so focused on answering the questions well that they have some potential anxiety about it, and they don't come off being as real as they want to be. And committees have a way of realizing that. And so they're going to be judging potentially how you handle a stressful situation. So in trying to have people be ready for an interview, that they're capable of performing well in the job, my way of trying to help people prepare for that is to start by realizing that your ability to be your best self is really important. And the way that it's directly related to the questions you ask is the process of how you're going to answer the questions that they ask. And you never know exactly what you're going to be asked, but you have some idea of that. You have some idea of the questions. So you know the area anyway. And so it is pretty easy to predict you're going to get a question about this, a question about this, and a question about this. And so what I have people do is start working on some frames of reference that will fit the questions that you're likely to get. So you have, and I listed several of my frames of reference, I could go on and on down below, that I could use to locate the person. Remember, the committee may not be an expert in the area you're trying to get hired in. So you want to locate them so that they can grab onto something that makes sense to them that you're saying. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have, I don't know how many I've got there, 15 or so right now, but select some frames of reference that you know you can locate the person and start your answer in some of the questions that you're asked to answer. So let's take, let's take the first one in the middle column. If I was to expect that I had to answer something relative to what Amy talked about this morning, about certainty and uncertainty, acceptance without acquiescence would be a perfect way for me to start an answer to that question. Acceptance is really important, but you need to keep moving forward. And so how you start moving forward is the way I would then frame my answer to the question. Does that make sense? There are frames of reference that make a lot of sense that you know you have going in, that you've practiced, and you've practiced answers to the questions that you expect to get in the interview process. I've had really good success with people who will work with me, and I've gone through like 3 processes where I ask them questions over a period of time, and they get better and they get better and they get better as we work with that. But I guess one way to underline it would be, don't forget that they have to like you. So you have to be the likable you. And I'm going to turn it over to Christopher. You did a great job on working with the stuff we worked on today. And Christopher, you're on.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Korach. I really appreciated today's session, and I think our group got a lot out of trying to design the questions. It lets you know just how much crafting goes into asking good questions if you want to get them to reveal a certain something from there. And so, one, I want to thank all of you for being here today. It was fun to see you in person last time, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in person at our next one, which will be at the Heritage House. Couple last reminders. I would love to have coffee with any of you that I haven't done that with already. Just feel free to reach out and we can do that. And then second is if any of you would like to be on our leadership team for next year, feel free to let us know, either Liz or myself, through email. Let us know if you have an interest in being one of those facilitators, as you've had a few people from last year's class, our leadership team this year, who've been here helping facilitate for you. If you'd like to fulfill that role next year for people in next year's class, we'd love to know about it. And then despite what Dr. Korach said, I'm going to veer off from the routine asking you of what you got out of being here today. And I'm going to ask a slightly different question. Hopefully he'll forgive me for veering off script. His sixth question that we all went over was a take on a Goeth quote, which is one of my favorite quotes. Things which matter the most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least. I think there's a ton of wisdom in that, and yet there's oftentimes that we in our lives do allow things that matter less to get in the way of things that matter most. So my question for you is this. What is the thing that matters most to you that you're going to keep front and center over this next month? Is there a quality? Is there a thing? Is there an ideal that truly does matter most to you? And are there ways you can keep that front and center? I would love for you to try holding on to one particular thing that matters the most to you and see what happens to your interactions in your day if you do manage to keep that front and center. And that being the case, then, if you're willing to reveal it, I'd like to go around the room and ask each of you to reveal what that one thing that matters the most to you either has been historically or will be in this upcoming month. So I think we should be able to get through everybody before our usual close time of 11:30. But if you do have to go, please raise your hand and I'll call on you first because you'll pop to the front of my screen like Judy has. So Judy, what is that value that matters most to you?
I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I can never figure it out. Well, I think the first thing that you said in the first class was the relationship leadership is all about relationship. And I had been definitely ignoring and not valuing relationships in my life. I wasn't answering my phone mess. I was really busy at work, lots of overtime, exhausted. And I was pushing out relationships. I wasn't answering my phone messages. I wasn't looking at my emails. I wasn't answering my mail. I was just disconnecting. And this has really taught me that relationship is the most important thing. And I really value that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Humera, I'm going to have you followed by Parker.
The one thing that I'm going to keep front and center this month, which is something that I'm improving on too, is helping others through clear and empathetic communication.
Great.
And that is because I was, in the hindsight, when I looked back from the beginning of this process that I started with the leadership course, I used to think that I'm communicating clearly in my mind, and the responses I was getting was bothering me a lot in my relationships or otherwise in any other projects that I was doing. So this made me look into why is this happening, or else I would have definitely ignored. So that is one thing I'm going to keep up doing this coming month. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Parker, I'm going to have you followed by Laura.
Yeah, I think I've just had a lot of change and stress going on the last 6 to 8 months. And I think through kind of sitting in here, communicating and challenging thought processes, I think the thing that's really kind of helped get through some of those tougher times has been really to focus on the big picture and my why, and not to get, sucked into, negative things happen and then you kind of domino, and that's the only thing you think about. When a million positive things happen, that negative really weighs on, kind of like what Ami was saying this morning. But that's kind of my focus now going forward. So at least for this next month is to focus on not the reaction, but the why, and not to dwell on things, but to do the right thing, even if it's the hard thing, and have the hard conversations and do the things that I feel like I need to be doing, because that's keeping me centered on my why, on why I'm moving forward. So
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that. Laura, I'm going to have you followed by Andrea.
We're kind of jumping into staffing season here in school land. So I think over the next month, I'm really going to be thinking about how do I, both look at when we're hiring someone new, think about the values that we want to bring into the school, and think about how our interview process pulls that out of people. I also think I'm going to be thinking about how I prepare to have some of those difficult conversations when there are staffing shifts that aren't necessarily things people are hoping for, as how do I handle those types of conversations as a leader.
Thank you, Laura. Andrea, I'm going to have you followed by Larry.
Thanks. I think I'll practice bringing active listening front and center in the coming month. It's something that tends to fall by the wayside when you're in a hurry. You just want to get, straight ahead answer. And I think it goes a long way towards the relationships that Judy was talking about, if you can really do some very intentional active listening.
Awesome. I look forward to hearing how that goes for you. Larry, I'm going to have you followed by Dan.
Well, I think being retired, one of the things that you lose in retirement was all the relationships you had in work. And what I'm going to continue to do in the next month is focus on building relationships in the community and reaching out to different parts of the community to meet new people.
Great. Fantastic, Larry. Dan, I'm going to have you followed by Kaylee.
I'm going to try to be more present. I tend to take things from this square little box home and perhaps not be as attentive to whoever I'm with at home. Whomever sounds strange. I should just say my wife. There's not a lot of strangers wandering in and out of my home. So be more present with, and when she's talking, or other members of the family or whoever I'm with is talking, be more present and pay attention to them, rather than thinking, oh man, my new office needs a key to the back door. I got to go get that key made, and blah, blah, blah. And then I lose focus on where I'm supposed to be at. So try to be more centered and focused.
Awesome. Look forward to hearing how that goes. Kaylee?
Really what I want to have front and center is a moment or many moments of reflection. I feel that I get maybe it's caught up in time, maybe it's something else, but I'm very good at repeating patterns, whether that be my routine or just my thoughts. I feel like a time of reflection would allow new ideas to come forward, and then allow me to take action on those ideas.
Absolutely. As an offhand point, one of the things that studies were showing was, with the advent of smartphones, people never have that downtime. We used to sit and wait for a bus, or we used to have to sit and wait for things. And now it's new information, new information, new information. And one of the main things we've lost is that time for reflection. So it'll be great to hear how that goes for you. On my screen next, I have Jackie, and then that will be followed by Cece.
Okay. So in the face of change, I find, and I'm committed to having consistent habits and being centered, and that daily self-care is really important so that I can be there for others.
Absolutely. It's got to start right there. Great. Thank you, Cece. I'm going to have you followed by Melissa.
So after this, I would like to center on positively, actively facing uncertainty. Instead of have the anxiety level kick in, I need to find a way to calm down and facing the uncertainty. at the proudly and effectively. And again, surrounding is also practice crucial conversation with community, with team, and with everyone else around me.
Great. Thank you. Melissa, I'm going to have you followed by Trevor.
Hi, before I do mine, also just a shout out to 100% Chiropractic, which I've been going to for like 3 or 4 months. Like the office has such a great vibe, CC. So really lovely humans.
Thank you.
There.
Thank you. Please, everyone join there just for fun.
I have a goal of working less in the day-to-day of my business. And so I want to continue to focus on manifesting flexibility and abundance for myself. And it's interesting because what Ami said earlier about this, like your go-to strategy, I'm definitely a go-througher. I'm like, you know, I spent a long time in the military. It's like, just put your head down and keep going, and eventually you'll get through it. And have realized that I may have hit the ceiling on that strategy. And so I think giving myself the chance and the space to say like, oh, I don't have to be the one that carries everything. And I need to figure out how to build the systems that allow other people to carry things in a way that like gives me faith and confidence that our business is being cared for the way that we also need it to be cared for. So that's mine. Flexibility and abundance.
Flexibility and abundance, front and center. Great. Trevor, I'm going to have you followed by Shelley.
Okay, perfect. For this month and moving forward through building my private chiropractic practice just down the street from 100% Chiropractic, I'm going to be working on self-reflection, introspection, and assimilation of our course materials. In our breakout session today, I shared with Chris and my group that as the class has gone on, it's been a little bit more difficult for me to take that time, to his point of lacking reflection. So I'm definitely going to focus on that, and hopefully I'll have positive things to share with everybody next time.
Awesome. Look forward to it. Shelley, I'm going to have you followed by Kelly.
All right. For this month, what I really want to focus on, what matters the most to me this month is to make sure that I'm being present and impeccable when I'm spending time with others, and just be aware like what is expected of me in each particular situation. And I think this really involves the practice of the pause and self-awareness. But I also want to reflect really quickly on what CC said, because that really hit me, that I need to really work on facing the uncertainties too. I tend to avoid them. So maybe that would be my next month thing to focus on.
Nice. Awesome. Look forward to hearing how that goes. Kelly, I'm going to have you followed by Mark.
Goodness, so many things I'd like to repeat that has already been spoken, but I think I am so deeply enmeshed in the alchemy of life, and to be forward in the heart-centered space of when I'm engaging with any individual, to be in a place of compassion and understanding and or reflection and or acknowledgement of the other human's experience. So I think for me in this moment, that's just so much of how I walk in the world, but it seems to be so much more needed now, to make sure that another person can be witnessed, whether that be in the grocery line or whatever that may be, to be very heart-centered and open to that human experience, and to be able to reflect that and be a light in the room, in any room that I walk into, even within my own darkness, because we have the shadows, but to be able to walk forward and be that pillar. So that's where my focus has been and will continue to be this month.
Great. Thank you. Mark?
So first of all, real pleasure to be with everybody today. I'm going to work on creative engagement, including, and probably the foundation of which is deep listening. And I'm going to do that in a couple of ways. I've been very fortunate to spend 40% of my time for the last 3 decades in nonprofit work. And often in leadership or chairing boards. At the moment, we're working with a group called Superhumans in Lviv, Ukraine, which is the center of providing prosthetic limbs to the up to 60,000 people who've lost one or more limbs. And so we're engaging in a variety of ways from a distance. We've hooked them up to an international PR firm to broaden the message. And we're working with groups of doctors who can go over on medical missionary work. The other example of that is that the little charity we started 7 years ago is now the largest bike charity on the West Coast. And so the creative engagement involves all kinds of interest groups, from churches to schools to kids in need, in figuring out in each case how the relationship works, how we remain financially viable while we serve community. And finally, I'd say that in our investment banking business, it's a really challenging time, as some of our financial managers on the line know, with, you know, kind of war and chaos and uncertainty and election in front of us. So how do you move projects forward when there is huge angst in the world? So you start with deep listening and then stay creative.
Awesome. Creative engagement. Now I apologize because the hands popping up and everybody moving around is Abby.
Yeah, hi. So this has been a great discussion. I hope to take with me, again, a few people have said being present and active, listening, which has definitely been a struggle area for me, but kind of one step further is when there is a difficult situation or some friction happening, you know, I tend to want to react or avoid the situation. And I'm going to try to take that pause, be mindful, and then think of a kind of different creative approach to engage some of those tough situations.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think that will be a fun focus for a month. Last thing I would say, we'll ask our leadership team to stay on so we can chat afterwards. But again, I thank you all for being here. I just want to leave you with, again, something that came up in one of those last months was what I found to be the best definition for resilience. And that was the ability to positively and productively respond to challenge and difficulty. So I wish you all well. I hope that you can keep what matters most to you front and center. And I look forward to connecting